Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Ni hao, Buenos dias, Buenas tardes, Heseche, Aquaba, Welcome. What up, though? This is Cafe Melange, week uno, session tres. Today is miércoles, Wednesday, Macredi, the fourth day of the week, day numero cuatro. Yeah, and up through the day, it is clear, clear skies, blue sky. Then about 30 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, clouds start talking loud, but ain't saying nothing. And then, just as I go outside to set up and start the session, the clouds start saying something. And saying it in the forth. And now as I come back in, they quiet up now. But anyway, that's the situation here. At the moment in the Cuyahoga, I got dos cosas por hoy, por aujourd'hui. One thing though, as a preface, is logistics. I start the meeting or the session about 10 minutes late, and then when I started, I started with a different meeting joint code to access. So the meeting, I don't know if we can see that. The meeting is going on at this moment. Is that visible? Yeah. It's going on at this moment. It's available for those who want to call in. Again, there's only been one invite for people to call in. They called in on Monday, so modest expectation of anybody calling in the near future, meaning the next day or two, because Thursday is when we wrap the week up for these sessions. So I am planning to send God willing, I will send an invite to a few brethren, today, and see what we can do for next week. In the meantime, I share what I got. Like I said, it's a big expectation for me to have something prepared each day, but it's also appropriate because what else is the point? So, well, there's a lot of other points, but for viewing, it's like, okay, you're there, so what? So I try to have something, and it's something of interest, something of relevance, something of substance and resonance. So for hoy, I got dos cosas. Oh, and I also had to do a confessional. I mentioned yesterday that today is the first day of the year in the Holy Earth calendar. And in this first week, we, in our Melange tradition, culture, we affirm our ancestors. We take this opportunity of affirming our ancestors. And so I mentioned there being a ceremony. I want to show it today because I didn't show it yesterday. A little bit of a time crunch. The meeting goes decent, very modest attendance. There is actually other people there, at least one other person I should say. And we have a decent conversation. We're building. It's the first session. What you expect? Anyway, but because of the expediency of the session yesterday, I abstained from showing this. But this is like the liturgy of the affirming our ancestors ceremony or ritual. This is the first page. It has a poem that is like a representation of the earth, an invocation of the earth, and called lessons of the healing of all peoples. It continues on to cover these topics. The text is available if anybody wants it. Whenever you get this, you can hit me up on the email asonaashram@gmail.com, ASONAASHRAM. So this includes just basically the sequence, the different components of the liturgy of the ceremony. It's got like speaking points, in introduction. There's a plate, there's narratives, there are affirmations of identity, and then that's what this back part is particularly of, is a sequence of affirmations, specifically pertaining to our ancestors. This one is a recognition of the ethics that bring us together and that keep us together. Uh, there's an open mic session because that's part of the culture of our Melange crew, having that opportunity for contemporary cultural expression. And then there's a meal because, well, you gotta have a meal. So that's what that's about. Um, so my confession is I didn't do it yesterday. Got caught up with some other things. Um, and one of the challenges of positivity is like additional things emerge, and so I abstain from inviting anybody at the moment because that's just where things are at the moment. To participate in the ceremony specifically, so because of that, I there is a solicitation for another combo, so I invest myself within that. Um, and so my plan is to do it today, the ceremony today. I mentioned yesterday it can be done at any point in the year, but it's particularly concentrated in this week, and it can be done at any point during the week. So I continue in that regard. So that's just a preface. But those courses that I have to share, one is a letter, and the other is kind of like an insider uh, insight into some work that we're doing here with Melange Songa and our diaspora. So this letter, I'm actually just going to read the letter and then I'll give an explanation of it as well. And we'll try to keep this, again, within the confines of about half an hour. Because people, whatever, alright. This is the letter. That lighting as well, got some issues with that. So, dear women of Earth, we men of Earth have disrespected you women of Earth. We seek to make amends with you. We admit we have molested you, we have starved you, we have abducted you, we have lied to you, we have put you into our clothes, told you to do our work, and then called you weak and ugly and inferior. We have held you against your personal will, against our unattainable standards, against our better teachings. We have prostituted you. We have watched you be prostituted over and over again. We have terrified you into hiding, disguised as men in public corridors. We have terrified you into hiding, exposing your immodesty in public corridors. We have lied and called this freedom and individual rights. We have subtracted your faith in men and in God. We have cheated you, cheated on you, cheated with you, cheated without you. We have dishonored you, ourselves, our families, our communities, our traditions, our ancestors. And we have blamed you. We have abandoned you. We have wallowed at you. We have apologized to you, and we have violated you again. We have lured you and lied to you and to ourselves. We have enslaved you with our chains and fences. We have enslaved you with our laws and religions. We have enslaved you with our thoughts, our lusts, our greed, hatred, and delusion. We have enslaved you with our selfishness, manipulations, and guilt. We have enslaved you with our insecurities and our violent overcompensations. We have murdered and raped and stolen, and we have corrupted you with the spoils. We have passed this on to our children too long. We want peace. We want reconciliation. We want harmony. We want new beginning. We want new life with you. We want your forgiveness. We want to return to again be your sons, your brothers, your fathers, your uncles, nephews, grands, and cousins, your husbands, your partners. We proclaim you are beautiful, you are holy, you are sovereign. You are genuine, wholesome, nurturing in your own natural way. Brown, blue, green, gray, yellow, orange, olive, jasmine, saffron, ebony, red, straight, kinky, curly, wavy, bald, braided, dreaded, long, short, round, thin. We want you to find again home, health, serenity, peace, comfort, meaning, fulfillment, prosperity, harmony in who you are and in who we are together. The Divine Spirit is with you. We cherish your patience, fidelity, and perseverance to continue to hold on to us. We want to do better. We want to do better by you. We want to do better with you. We implore your understanding. We implore your forgiveness. We implore your continuing love. We love you. God willing, we will listen better to your deeds, words, and thoughts, to do, communicate, and think better. One love and peace from the men of earth. So, an explanation. The letter was written a number of years ago. During actually this period of the year, a little bit earlier in the period of the year, during the approach of the high holy days within the tradition of Israel, and also amidst the approach of Parishan within Jain tradition. Within both of these traditions, each of these periods is a period of atonement, of reflection, of considering the harms that we've caused in the past year, and making our best efforts in making amends to the people that we've harmed. So I write this letter a number of years ago when I go through the process of reflection and atonement. And for people like myself who are spiritualists but begin an intentional spiritual path later in life, when we come to find these teachings and this guidance and this wisdom, it's after years and previous years of hurting people, and so it's difficult to even find the people, even name some of the people that we've harmed in significant ways in the past. And so we do our best, and continue to do our best to make amends, but in that process we continue on with our lives as appropriate as possible. And the weight lingers though, and so this is a letter that I write after going through that process of reflection and considering communicating something, making an effort, a further effort of making amends. And I recognize that I actually have apologized and approached people in past years when I in early stages of that spiritual path, of my spiritual path a number of years ago, and some people are like, wow, thank you, appreciate that, cool, forgiven. Some people are like, oh, no big deal, whatever. Some people are still enveloped in some of that harmful behavior and have difficulty recognizing it being harmful behavior, and so sometimes there's offense in the apology, even just the apology. What are you talking about? Why are you apologizing for that? Yeah, you think you're so high and mighty? What? There's a little bit of that, but that's very few that I've experienced that, and it tends to be kind of quiet or just non-responsive. But then there's also the discomfort of bringing up past transgressions and judging up bad memories and harmful things. So it can be difficult, and that's part of like the price to pay in making amends is knowing the discomfort that it causes the person we've harmed, but still having to, when appropriate. Sometimes it depends on the situation, but there is still an obligation of reaching out, and that's like double difficult for a spiritualist and for like somebody on a spiritual path, to like even introduce or reintroduce things that one knows is going to have be difficult for the recipient. Anyway, so my point is that because of from that difficulty and from that experience, oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, in certain occasions, in certain circumstances, it can be helpful to communicate something in a general way, and to provide an overture so that it's not necessary to go into all the details about what was done in the past, but just say, yo, my bad, and do it in a way that abstains from um, calling upon the victim, the recipient, to conjure all those bad memories. Because even just by seeing a person or hearing a person's name, that's enough to like remember what happened. So for that, just say, yo, this is so and so, and I apologize. That oftentimes that I can't say oftentimes in that sense. Oftentimes that can be enough. Now if the recipient, the victim's like, for what? What are you talking about? And if the person says, you're gonna have to go further than that. Is that all you got? Then yeah, step up further and address that. But if it's just like, okay, I appreciate that. That's enough, and that's all it needs to be. So this letter is amidst the challenges that I have in personally directly reaching out to the people that I've harmed and the women that I've harmed in the past. This is a letter that I write from myself, but I also write it on behalf of other men because I know other men, I know many men, um, have yet to reach that awakening and that courage to own up to what we've done. And so I share this specifically for the personally for the women that I've harmed, directly and indirectly. Uh, and I also share this with the purpose of, I show the letter and I share the letter with men, because men need to see this, men need to hear this, men need to know this, so that men can continue in that process of reconciliation, of atonement, of making amends, and many of the convos that I have with men, some dudes like, yeah, I see the point, but yeah, this doesn't really truly apply to me. And some dudes are like, yo, man, they they're like, yeah. And so that's the majority of responses that I've received. I've shared this very modestly with a number of people, but that's the majority of the responses that I receive. So it helps to like set the standard and set the stage for having those combos, for having that reconciliation. I share this in this session, in the third session on the first week, day numero uno or week numero uno, because we need this in our melange community. Um, we need increased amount of trust, and relationship, healthy relationship amongst our melange brethren, between our melange brothers and our melange sisters. Um, Too often, in our experience, there is the discouragement of assimilating within a specific homogenous culture, and there's a significant amount of, historically there's a significant amount of um, leverage, oppression, even uh, self denial, self rejection, and self hatred, and this is imposed against ourselves individually, respectively, but also manifested within our relationships and the way we trust each other, and additionally, particularly the way the women in our melange fold trust our melange men, because if melange men are compromised and leveraged, and in the process of self denial, and self disrespect, uh, it's difficult for melange women to fully trust the melange men, and instead there's a tendency of saying, yeah, 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 love you, love you, love you, but when it comes down to it, trusting uh, men who are increasingly or perceivably aligned with the homogenous norm, because that's where the economic stability seems to be, and that's where the political influence seems to be, and additionally. And so there might be kind of like a surface level kind of, and actually, I mean, this is between husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, parents and children. So um, to remedy that, to heal that, to strengthen that experience of healthy relationship, and healthy self, um, there needs to be an acknowledgement of it, and there needs to be a process of reconciliation. So that's part of it. Um, but in just in general, um, many of the negative things that affect the relationship between men and women who are melange are the same things that negatively affect the relationships between men and women of any ethnicity and culture, particularly within modern society. And a lot of that is the hypersexualization of society, and the way that women are woefully sexually objectified, and oppressed. Um, there's another word I'm looking for, but I'll leave it at the moment. Um, Exploited is the word I'm looking for. There it is. So there's a huge amount of exploitation, and mélanger men. Many mélanger men do it directly, are enveloped in that behavior of sexual exploitation towards mélanger women and to other women as well. And in many cases, mélanger men are politically, economically, and otherwise impotent from protecting mélanger women from that sexual exploitation. That's one thing that's talked about in our mélanger conversations is how much mélanger women are exotified, and hypersexualized, as objects of uh, sexual intrigue and additionally. And so um, there are trappings, there are benefits that come with that, and it's difficult to protect against that. So um, that is part of the challenge, part of the pain and the suffering that requires healing, reconciliation, amends. And so I share this letter in that context with that mindfulness. I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll share cosa número dos. Um, so the second thing, cosa número dos, is notes. Mañana we have a phone meeting with members of the Baha'i National Council. I think that's the title of the organization. It's the Baha'i. It's the Baha'i international community. Baha'i is a religion, a world religion, one of the largest. I think it's like sixth or seventh largest of in humanity. And one of the basic fundamental principles in the Baha'i tradition is with the oneness of the human family, and many of the Baha'i um, leaders, like not even leaders, like the prophetic, um, um, the term in the Baha'i faith is manifestation of God, which is Baha'u'llah, but the son of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, specifically, directly, publicly solicits members of the Baha'i community to marry interethnically, to have interethnic marriages, and children. And there are a number of stories that speak to that effect. And this is over 100 years ago during the height of lynchings and additionally. So that's a very formidable um, uh, proclamation and principle. And so this is something that is significant within the Baha'i tradition. And thus we've established a communication, an open communication, with the Baha'i community about being mélanger, and what kind of cooperation and mutual support can be cultivated between the mélanger diaspora and the Baha'i international community. Um, Baha'i community proselytizes, and so much of its purpose of outreach is in encouraging people to join the Baha'i faith. And so many mélanger brethren are fine where they are, or may be searching, but may have less of an interest in Baha'i tradition. Many may have an interest in the Baha'i tradition. So the terms or the understanding of our communication is how um, if the Baha'i community genuinely touts the principle of the oneness of the human family and um, interethnic marriages and multi-ethnic children, then there needs to be some type of general support, a general approach to that, rather than, and there's arguability. Is the Baha'i community has the prerogative of doing and saying what it entitles along these lines. But it seems like if the purpose of the principle is um, interethnic harmony and intermarriage, then that's a principle categoric whether people are or people are Baha'i or otherwise. Um, and then on our side, there's the recognition of um, the Baha'i community has its priorities, and yes, being the intermarriage between ethnicities and the oneness of the human family is significant, but it exists within a spectrum of principles and priorities, and that many of those priorities are focused for the benefit and welfare of the Baha'i brethren. So that's very logical and legit too. So the consideration is how we find our and strengthen our common ground and the mutual support and interest for our respective endeavors, our respective interests and well-being. So um, again, this is something that started in the past year directly. It's been maybe a month or two since we've had a call recently, but we have one scheduled for mañana. And so I prepared some notes. And we on our side, with on the Melange side, specifically Melange Songa, um, there are some specific objectives that we have, focusing on the United Nations, and I tend to communicate that in a little bit. Um, However, we've shared some intentions with the Baha'i community already, and there's been general support without necessarily um, direct follow through or references or referrals or things to that nature. But again, the communication has been it's in the nascent stages, so that there's little expectation of that happening up to this point. Um, I say all that because for the meeting mañana, what I plan to share and invite is um, for the Baha'i community to talk about its principle of oneness of the human family and um, the uh, the experience of being Melange. How much of that is a priority? How much of it? Where does it fit within the priorities of the Baha'i community? And that pertains to um, Melange brethren who are Baha'i and Melange, and then also for Melange brethren who are not Baha'i. How much of that is a priority for Melange people? An example of that is when I talk about what the Baha'i community's um, uh, consideration is for Melange brethren who are non-Baha'i. Um, in some ways, people say, well, what does a religious community have to do with people who are outside of that religious community? True enough. However, simultaneously, it's like saying we're for world peace. And whenever there is an abrogation against that world peace, regardless if it's against that specific religious community, or against another community, that's an abrogation of that principle of world peace, or even just peace itself. And so, if a community, Baha'i or otherwise, if a community's platform and foundation, one of the foundational principles is peace, and there is woeful, rampant violation of that principle, then is the principle only applicable for peace within that religious community, or is it for peace categorically? And in the specific principle of peace, if somebody is experiencing a violation of peace, does that not necessarily affect everybody's experience of peace? As Martin Luther King shares injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So that's the same line, the same rationale pertaining to melange. Is it melange categorically, or is it only melange within the Baha'i community? And it's not like a coming at you what kind of thing, but it's just like matter of factly, like where does melange stand within the priorities of the Baha'i community, so that we can know like just where the Baha'is are coming from, and continue in our conversation and our expectations accordingly. Um, yeah, I'm getting a lean on this hair that is distracting, but it's okay. It's just hair. Um, I'll do this. Part of the challenge might be because the table is at an angle that is different from the window, and so I'm trying to keep the lines level, and not and my thus my elbows are somewhat askew on the table, and that might conjure, or that might be what leads to the hair leaning to one side, and also my notes and everything else. Anyways, side note, pause. Here we go again. Um, so that's the consideration, just discerning amongst the Baha'is, the Baha'i brethren, our Baha'i brethren, where the priority is concerning involving melange. I'm also turning that way a lot. So yeah. So that's where I intend to begin the meeting, just but with that communication. So not me saying anything, just where does this stand? Where do we stand in the Baha'i priorities? And then we'll proceed from there. Um, then I have a list of things. You can see it to share. Um, First thing is like kind of doing a little bit of a recap. I've shared a number of things, and particularly, when the convo started a few months ago, early this past year. Um, wow, it's probably like 6 months at this point, half a year ago. I was catching hell, getting a lot of static. I got locked up, abused, um, and still experiencing strife in a number of ways, an embargo and additional things. So, but particularly during that period, there was static, and when things get like that, when we start talking with people for the first occasion, sometimes we share additional information that's not necessarily the most conducive to the building of the conversation, but it's where we are at that moment. And why talk about small stuff when we're getting things are serious. So even then, Baha'i brethren weathered that, and kind of in some ways respond to that in a general way, and sometimes are quiet and non-responsive because like wow, what are we supposed to do? We just met you, and but still continuing to communicate. So that says much for the Baha'i community, and particularly the National Assembly, the National Spiritual Assembly, within the United States. So there's appreciation for that. Now that being said, what I have listed is like some of our the experience of melange and and of our melange community, our melange diaspora. Um, I intend to abstain from sharing the numbers that I share in session numero uno. I can have it available just in case there's reference to that. But what I do plan to share is like the gifts that melange bring, and this is the gift. Those gifts that melange bring to the table, that benefit other communities in a serious way. Um, Numero uno is when an environment is comfortable and supportive for melange experience, for melange brethren to be melange. Within that same exact environment, people from all different ethnic backgrounds and communities are supported, and there's comfort for being genuinely each and any of those respective specific ethnic and cultural identities, experiences, traditions, full stop. So when melange can be melange, everybody can be everybody, and there's thorough support for the genuine identity and experience and tradition and heritage of all peoples. That's one thing. The second thing, numero dos, is that when the environment is supportive and comfortable for Melange to be Melange, the relationships and the cooperation between people from different ethnic communities is increasingly genuine, enduring, and prosperous. So, so often, even through today, especially through today, a lot of people talk about diversity. Some people talk about pluralism. A lot of people talk about multiculturalism. However, very often, in each of those pursuits, particularly diversity and multiculturalism, the scenario is that homogenous communities have a specific agenda for getting involved in any kind of initiative, program, event, investment, additionally, institution, and it's a self-serving and reasonably so, rationally so. It's a self-serving agenda. It's a self-serving purpose, and so yes, there may be a lot of mouth talk to the notion of racial harmony, ethnic harmony, and kumbaya, this and the other. But in actuality, each group is only participating because of the benefits that it specifically, the tangible benefits, whether it's policy, whether it's investment, whether it's public benevolent will, and additionally, depending upon what the ethnic community's needs are, that's the primary purpose for the community's involvement in the initiative, and it's other than for just the sake of ethnic harmony and kumbaya, and additionally. Some people might say that seems to be very harsh cynicism. Some people might say like, no, duh, what else are they supposed to do? But the consideration is that in the communication of these endeavors, whether it's just like a parade, whether it's a cookout, whether it's an academic institute, or a scholarship or whatever else, there's a whole lot of fanfare and propaganda about diversity and multiculturalism that gives an air, a facade, a front of people being welcome and being people's selves, and like, oh, we all get along, and look at us, we're all friends, and oh, look at us, we're how small, happy, smile happy, yay, yay, yay. And that type of environment encourages particularly youth and other people who are inclined towards that to get involved. And so it's the same type of propaganda that governments do, that corporations do, and additionally, it's marketing. And so communities, ethnic communities, see the benefit of this fanfare and getting involved in that fanfare, and not necessarily making the fanfare an actuality, where there are communities that actually look like that and live like that, but just enough to have the smiling faces, enough to have the numbers, and promoting those, facilitating the process, and reaping the benefits that come from that as well. So I'm getting a little bit in detail into that, but the gift of Mélanger is that when we have environments that are supportive and comfortable to be Mélanger, those relationships, that fanfare is actual, it's genuine, and it is enduring, because in my experience in the past 20 years doing this joint, a lot of the multiculturalism, diversity initiatives and things like that don't last long. The initiative might last long, the people in them don't last long. Maybe the longest tenure might be 4 or 5 years, and then the person gets reassigned to something else. Oftentimes, something within the own community's own self, and kind of like getting back into the fold of the own community, back into the embrace of the own community, and so. And so it's like, oh yeah, I did my stint. I did my charity work for pluralism. I did my charity work for diversity and multiculturalism. Now I'm going to go back to home base and be who I actually am. So Oftentimes it's just a year. Maybe sometimes, oftentimes it's just a day, or an event. Maybe a week of activities. And sometimes it's like a yearly thing, and people show up once a day for a year. Sometimes, amongst the modest number of institutions that exist, staff is on there for a year. Staff is there for a couple years. And like I said, for the most part, the longest duration is about 4 or 5 years, and then there's reassignment. So when there are melange environments, that that are conducive and supportive and comfortable for melange brethren to be melange, that makes the relationships further genuine, and makes the relationships further enduring. And through that endurance, there's greater prosperity because there's less turnover. There's an increased amount of institutional wisdom, individual wisdom, that is retained within the endeavor, and that translates into better ways of doing it, and thus the benefits, the prosperity that is reaped from that. So, anyways, those are the gifts of melange, and this is way longer than I was planning. Then we get into the melange needs. So, in melange needs, individually, as melange brethren, individually, our needs range the spectrum. There are many of us who are very rich. There are many of us who are very poor. And so we experience the needs that are commensurate with each of those socioeconomic experiences. So it's difficult to say what the categorical need for melange individuals is, because it runs the gamut. However, collectively, there are certain needs to strengthen our experience as a melange community, as a melange diaspora. That includes recognition, just being recognized by the international community, by the United Nations, by governments, by the general public as being melange. Yo, that's a thing. It's legit. It's cool. It's honest. It's beneficial. So recognition, and then from that, support. Um, okay, recognize, but we need the same things everybody else needs, and we need it in the way we are, um, to support who we are, and to be increasingly intentional with affirming our identity, our experience, and the principles, the protocols, that strengthen who we are. And so we need that, and part of that support, that's individually, that's community based, but significantly, the third need is institutional infrastructure. Um, the support, again, like I said, is individual, is also organizational and community based, but it's a matter of recognizing the benefits that melange brethren provide, and the needs that melange brethren have to continue providing that. So there is an onus on, um, government institutions, philanthropic organizations, international government organizations, and additionally, particularly those that are predicated upon the premise of pluralism, to support melange. And that support means, for poor, materially impoverished melange brethren, that means social service programs. It means educational support. That means family services, family counseling, and additionally, that means, professional networking, and investment, and additionally, in community groups, melange community groups, and additionally. So, and that's where we get into that third element of institutional infrastructure. Um, so that is one of the biggest things for us to do as the melange diaspora and community at this moment, globally as well as locally, is strengthen our institutional infrastructure, and so that we can be melange directly and intentionally, and derive livelihood in doing that. We have cultural groups, we have an academic initiative, and we have some things that speak to that, but still, much of that is funded and supported not by melange, or not on the premise of melange per se, but through as a subsidiary of another entity, and in accordance with the other entity's agenda and priorities. So it's a matter of building the autonomous infrastructure, institutional infrastructure of our melange community and diaspora, so that we can be increasingly self-sufficient, and self-supporting, um, uh, within the guise of being Melange. So, our concentration is on the United Nations. Like I say, United Nations is the largest international government, international government organization, intergovernment organization, um, and specifically predicated upon international harmony, and that includes interethnic harmony. And so it has a strong onus of supporting Mélanger, at the very least recognizing Mélanger. Um, but also, um, our international community as well. I mentioned intergovernment organizations and non-government organizations. Um, Part of the reason why we focus on the United Nations rather than on any specific nation or just nationalism as a methodology, is because one, Mélanger is intrinsically global. It's intrinsically the Earth. There are zero borders within Mélanger. Um, I've shared discourses about this subject, so I'm not going to share it at this moment. But that's the nature of Mélanger. Um, that's the nature of our identity individually, but also the nature of our community collectively. And so the United Nations is a very appropriate forum and platform to concentrate our advocacy for recognition and support. Um, there are some other concerns regarding other methodologies. One of the concerns regarding approaching governments directly and exclusively is that governments have a certain tendency of domestic proprietorship, like ownership of the political identity of the citizenry, and so it's difficult for many governments to readily acknowledge directly without some type of outside influence Mélanger identity and experience, let alone even further support it and establish public policy that supports it. Because it's perceived as something antagonistic, antithetical to the national identity in many ways, in many cases, in many circumstances. So it's difficult to just focus exclusively and directly towards national governments. Um, it's easier to focus on an institution that's predicated upon international harmony and interethnic harmony, and then through those auspices, then approach national governments and saying, this is an international standard. Are you going to comply with the international standard? So that's the rationale regarding the absence of concentrating specifically on the national front. Additionally, like I mentioned before, the United Nations has um, the largest responsibility and interest in recognizing and supporting our Mélanger experience, our identity in our community. Um, so, one other element of that is argument is that multiculturalism without multi-ethnicity is appropriation, and I speak to that just a few minutes ago about how when communities tout the notion and the tenet of multi-racial harmony, multi-ethnic harmony, but then abstain from even recognizing multi-ethnic people, um, that's an appropriation of the multicultural and multi-ethnic experience and that harmony. So that needs to be addressed and remedied. So what we solicit is, again, recognition and access to the United Nations system. That includes just a very, very simple, mundane type of recognition and access to the United Nations Statistic Division, particularly for the purpose of establishing a legit, thorough, official census of our Mélanger diaspora. At this moment, what's available publicly, as most recent we check, it's a partial global census that only includes less than half the UN nations providing anything, and then of those less than 100 U.S. nations or UN member nations, only 30 to 40 actually even reporting any information about having a melange population, any statistics, having a statistical category that involves or that articulates the melange experience and melange identity. So there's a lot that needs to be done, just even in the U.S. Stats Division, along those lines. Another one, again, that's very simple and mundane, is UNITAR, United Nations Institute of Training and Research. So, doing workshops, lectures, panel discussions on the experience of melange. What are the priorities? Having a forum where people talk to this and globally and share this with the UN system and with the international community, the NGOs and IGOs with consultative status with the UN, and get some discussion going academically, professionally about melange. It's needed for the earth. And so that, again, this is like basics. That's easy. That doesn't take very much. There are so many programs and things going on, initiatives in the UN that are going on that, in many ways, arguably in comparison, are superfluous. Like are like, wait, you're talking about this and you're not going to talk about that? What? I'm not going to give examples because I don't want to belittle anything per se, but it's like, yo, come on. Again, my melange diaspora is over 100 million by the records, by the partial incomplete records of the United Nations, over 100 million, and even then, that's recognized as woefully underrepresented. The numbers. So, anyways, those are just very basic objectives. Then further, the objective is establishing a melange agency within the UN system, specifically within the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, similar to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Legit for the UN PFII to be with the UN system, and there should be even further. There should be a member observer mission to the United Nations on behalf of indigenous peoples. But the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is a step in that direction. It should be a step in that direction, and even that is woefully late in arriving, and it only is established a few years ago, maybe a decade ago. So there's a certain curve and there's a certain path that these things take, but that's like basic common sense. Melange is along those same lines. Melange is kind of like the 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 result of success when there is inter-ethnic harmony, when there is international cooperation. People meet each other, people get married, people have babies, and those babies grow up and lead and have gifts to share. But there needs to be and needed gifts, necessary gifts, urgent gifts, and there needs to be genuine recognition and support for the providers of those gifts, for the melange people who provide those gifts. So that's part of the rationale for having an agency in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, in the Secretariat of the United Nations system. And that takes a little bit further doing. It takes a little bit further rapprochement and arrangement, but that's actually very basic. And in that process, what we solicit is rapprochement with proximate IGOs and NGOs. IGOs that are specifically involved in intergovernment in multiculturalism, pluralism, and diversity. NGOs, same thing, but having access and introductions and connections with those agencies. This is very technical, kind of, sort of, but this is what it is. So then we get to the melange objective. Overall, what we're looking for, what the purpose of all this is. Basically, we want increasing local and global supportive environments, for melange people to be melange, for school children to be able to be melange, and for when school children are taunted, and additionally, for there to be support structure, for there to be counselors, for there to be teachers who know how to handle situations. for families, for family counseling. We want guidance and for youth as they mature and learn about their heritage to be supported in that process. And that involves having multicultural curriculum and resources available and training amongst educators to facilitate that learning process. This also includes support and investment within Melange families and in Melange communities to have discussions, to meet each other, to talk, to strengthen, to learn best practices about being Melange, what the lessons that are learned, and to learn additionally about our ancestry, our heritage, and to strengthen that connection. That's something that's seriously needed amongst Melange brethren. It's seriously needed amongst all people, particularly in postmodern society, our connection to our roots, but particularly amongst Melange because we are so historically discouraged and dissuade from genuinely honoring our ancestors. I am a case in point just this past day. We want increasingly supportive environments globally and locally for us to be Melange. We want public awareness and recognition and support for being who we are. And that might seem like a stretch of like, wait, what do you mean? We don't. This ethnicity doesn't get support for public support and recognition for who they want to be, and this and the other. Yeah, in many ways, we are just another ethnic community. In many ways, we are all ethnic communities. We are an ancient phenomenon. We're also a new phenomenon, and so there are certain nuances that are applicable to us that are distinct from other ethnic communities, and particularly within communities like where I'm sitting, which is surrounded by settler society. Everyone is come from a different place, and for people to be genuinely reconciled, even just with themselves and being on this land, let alone with each other and all the different things that we're doing with each other, there needs to be an environment that is comfortable and supportive for that pluralism experience, and that requires an environment that is comfortable and supportive of Melange experience. Um, and then again, institutional infrastructure, public policies, programs that support Melange people and communities, and that support Melange institutions, so that Melange institutions can be increasingly autonomous in providing the support, the advocacy, and the outreach that is needed within our Melange community. So that's basically the gist of it. How much I get into all of that, I'm kind of just seeing where the convo goes and what resonates with the people in the call, and provide details and priorities where appropriate. So, anyways, that's where things are at the moment. That's mañana, God willing, and that's what's happening this week. So that's pretty much a wrap. This is session numero tres of week numero uno of Cafe Melange. We're continuing to work to build it. Oh, I didn't say this before, but I mentioned before that I'm doing this. Only I'm planning to send out the invites. I mentioned that before. What I didn't mention is that the way I'm doing this at the point is like I already explained the thing about recording and everything else like that. What I was planning to do initially, and actually I uploaded initially the first recordings, all just raw. However, just today, one of the reasons for the delay is that I uploaded. I edited the call Monday, and I did a split screen, and it's hazy because the tech on here is modest. And I did a screen thing, and the emblem of the screen thing went over Brother Phillips' face, and so there's little I can do about that. So I just share what I can, and even then I had to like zoom in it. I had to crop and zoom in it, so I did the best I can. But my initial intention was is to do a split screen and just coincide the two videos together, and then just post that. That's distracting to see double of me for the majority of it, particularly when there's an absence of anybody else on the line. So what I plan to do, what I will do, God willing, is open the meeting up. So anybody who has the code, and it takes there's an ID code or whatever, I think, to access the meeting. Actually, that's how you find out what meeting to go to, is to have that meeting ID. And I've only shared that with one person at this point. I'm sharing those invites accordingly. I'm also reaching out to some other Melange brethren just to do a general invite, and if they want to follow through, I plan to give them the ID accordingly. But rather than just doing a split screen through the whole thing, I plan to just keep this joint going, which is not online. It's the laptop recorder, and then whenever somebody does call in, then start to record when they call in, and then post that in a split screen, in conjunction with that. So that's the methodology at this point. And like I said, the emphasis at this moment is sending some additional invites, and getting ready for the next week. So that's where things stand. Um, I have an idea what to share for mañana. A little bit lighter, maybe only uno cosa for mañana, and light, keeping it light to finish the week. Um, that seems appropriate. Yeah, so what we got for today? Again, weekly, Monday through Thursday, 14 hour Atlantic Standard Time, for about at least half an hour, thereabouts. And today is an hour. Um, and I I do my best to post it within a day. So that's what we're working with. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zaijian, adios, te jagris, esempina asamubu, kele ufred. One love and peace.